CM 365, all about Carnatic music.
When we talk about the aesthetics in music, we see that the concept of aesthetics itself is different from one system to the other. We will not go into the other systems of music in the world. Let us look even within the two Indian classical music systems, that is the Hindustani music and Carnatic music. Now in Carnatic music, we see that the building of the aesthetics in a concert is very gradual and it is through a number of items. So that is when we reach the main item, before that we see that a lot of other items or compositions are performed towards reaching that main item. So here we see that you may have multiple varieties like the Varnam coming in the front, and then a composition on Ganesha, various gods covered, various Kala Pramanas, various combination of ragas, then various Oedipus, various Thalas. So many things come to form the aesthetics before we move and culminate into what we call as the main item, which is elaborated very expansively. Now in the Hindustani music, we see that this kind of concept is not there, where the build-up to become expansive happens within each composition itself. For example, we may have about 10-15 compositions being performed in a kacheri, but in Hindustani music you won't see so many items being performed. Probably they'll take 2 or 3 rags for exposition, and probably at the end one thumri or a bhajan, and they'll finish it off. So the Hindustani system, you see that the build-up happens within the composition, in the sense that when they start the raga alapana, it is a very slow and gradual process from the mandra sthai. Slowly they will develop from note to note, they keep on developing, and even reaching the adhara shadja itself and establishing it takes a very long time. And then after that, slowly they will develop swara by swara, and that is the aesthetics of the system where it happens that way. The second thing, of course, is that the aesthetics of Hindustani music is such that the composition by itself, without the elements of the manodharma, holds no value. So when I say I'm performing rag yeoman, or when I'm performing rag malkons or something like that, it obviously implies not only the composition which is going to come in that particular ragam, but all the improvisatory material going along. And of course, the improvisation also differs from the kind of form they are taking. For Drupad, it's a different kind of improvisation they adopt. For Khyal, it's a different kind of improvisation they adopt. Nevertheless, the whole composite whole is what we are talking about as the aesthetics of the concert here. Coming back to Carnatic music, we see that here it is very unpredictable also, I would say, because in the sense that while I was talking about Hindustani music, you see that when I say Rag Yaman, it means that there will be a alap, and then the composition, then all the boltans, and then after the swaras, everything has to be there to make it complete. Whereas in our system, we see that the composition can appear as a individual entity itself, without any kind of improvisation to it. For example, you may just sing Akhilandeshwari and Dvajavanti just by like that, without anything before or after in terms of alapana, neraval or swaram. And also the quantum of the swaras depends on the artist. This is again, the aesthetics is very much dependent on the performer. For example, he may just sing a small composition in Bahudari or Suddha Simantini, and he may not have sing an alapan at all for that, but then some volleys of small, sprinkles of swaras he may sing just to give us an idea or a outline of what the ragam stands for, without going into detailed exposition. Sometimes he may do a more elaborate exposition. When it comes to the major item, it is obviously understood that it has to be given a very expansive treatment in terms of the raga alapana. The composition in itself is generally taken in a rendikala, quite big compositions are taken. The neraval swaram, then the taniya arthanam is also attached to it in terms of, then only the whole process of the main item is complete. But here again we see that what is to come as manodharma, where it is to come, everything except for the main item, it is quite unpredictable, and then it depends on the artist. Sometimes we also seen very great stalwarts. Generally we say that neraval has to be followed by kalpanaswaram. Generally we see that in concert. But sometimes the great stalwarts have felt that the Neraval line is so profound in meaning and so sublime that singing some Kalpana Swaras after that may even mar the mood of that particular Neraval that has been done. So they were abstained even from singing Kalpana Swaram, so they would just sing, sometimes very sparingly you would see that they'll sing just the Neraval and then finish off the song. So there are actually different ways. Even in Alapana, for example, there is nothing like you have to develop stage by stage. There are different ways. Sometimes you may just adopt a 2-3 minute Alapana exposition. So at that time you have to just run through the whole gamut of the ragam and finish it off. When you're doing it in a kind of average kind of elaboration, then you may take 2-3 focal points for elaboration and do it. And again, the choice of which areas the artist will try to explore, again, that depends on the mood, the taste of the artist and the ambience on that day. So many factors are responsible, his own creativity. So many things come into even deciding what areas of the ragam in terms of the swaras, which area in terms of the sthai he will explore. Everything is dependent on that day, and that also is a part of defining the aesthetics. Of course, when we talk about aesthetics, it is also very, very subjective in the sense that we have the Sahitya playing an important role here. So listeners actually, when you sing a song in a familiar language, they try to, or rather they are able to develop a special connect with it. Now, as a Tamilian, if I sing compositions in Tamil, for me actually the feel I am able to impart is naturally much better than I would do to a Telugu song, because of the fact that I do know Telugu but not as well as I know Tamil. So similarly, even for the audience, for a Tamil audience, when I sing a Tamil Kriti, the aesthetics gets enhanced in the sense that they're able to enjoy both the Sahityam and the music. And similarly, you see that for other languages also, when you go to, say for example, you're going to Karnataka, if you sing a Purandaradasa Kriti there, which is in Kannada, obviously they are able to connect to the composition better and they enjoy it better also. So this is something which is related to the listener also. But however, we should actually remember here that this meaning is totally different from the musical meaning of music. In the sense that when you are getting too much entangled in the Sahitya and the Sahitya Bhava, sometimes what happens is that you lose out on the music. This you would have seen. For example, suppose I'm singing Ka Vava, Kanda Vava, and it's about Muruga, and you start getting engrossed in the lyrics, and then you try to analyze what the composer is saying in the lyrics, and then you try to relate it to some Muruga temple you have visited, and all these kinds of complex images of the Sahitya start coming in. Then what happens is that we lose out on the aesthetics or the enjoyment of aesthetics of the music. So thus we could say that to understand musical meaning, the meaning of the composition conveyed in terms of the musical aspect, we see that one needs to take an objective approach where the listener thinks only about the concepts, sound, material, technique, patterns of the tone and the time, variety, expression, flow, development of the form, and so on. So here what I am trying to convey is that when you are looking at the aesthetics of the music that the artist is communicating, you actually have to sideline the Sahitya or the lyrical aspect and look at the musical elements that are being conveyed by the musician in terms of what I said, in terms of the sound, the material, technique, how he is throwing his voice, and what kind of permutation combination of music that he is using in terms of the phrases, the notes, and the patterns. So all this is the part of the musical element, and in connection with Laya, how does he actually relate the Laya and the melody, and all these things are part of the musical aesthetics. But ideally, if you look at how one should really enjoy the music, aesthetic appreciation should involve both objective and subjective responses. So that way we see that when there is a beautiful combination of the subjective and objective responses, then the aesthetic pleasure becomes much more. Thus, aesthetics is an important element of Indian classical music, which manifests in different ways from time to time, also from one performer to one another artist, that is from artist to artist, from performance to performance. And all this, of course, many factors also influence the aesthetics of the presentation on that particular day. Of course, the core element of the system are the raga, the thala and the sahitya. And it is the aesthetics of each artist which determines how they will organize it in the canvas of their performance. So as I said, we all are given the same material. If you look at, for example, if you're going to make a painting, you're given a canvas and all of us are given the same colors. But what will happen, each one is asked to paint a picture. We'll see that through our own imagination, we paint a different picture. Sometimes even the same subject you are giving, for example, suppose I say scenery, and ask each one of you to paint it according to your imagination, you'll see that the end product, each one would have painted the scenery in a different way. Similarly, in the aesthetics of ragas also, suppose I just give Madhyamavati as a ragam and ask 10 musicians to sing. Each one through his own imagination, his own thought process, he will create a new or a different picture of that Madhyamavati. And that's why we see that because of this varying, multifarious aspects involved in the aesthetics of our music, that every performance becomes a great, exciting experience, a beautiful experience, both for the performer as well as the listener.
CM 365, all about Carnatic music.